Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Best Damn Coach podcast. It's Amanda here. I am delighted, excited, ecstatic that you are here with me again this week because we are talking about a topic that you may not really even be noticing is happening in your business, but I'm sharing with you because I've been there and I want to help you really stop attracting clients who don't do the work. And I was inspired by a recent call inside my community where one of my coaches was extremely excited. She had a sales call with a client and she was like, this is the most ideal fit. This woman is perfect for my coaching. And then she started noticing some patterns that were happening. The client was no showing. When she did show up, the client would be late. The client wasn't doing the work that they had assigned. And she said, Amanda, like, why is this happening? What can I do in these situations? And really, I think this is a two-part conversation. In part, it's how do we keep the conversation and the coaching experience moving forward, even though they're not necessarily doing the work or meeting our expectations. But what I want to talk about today is what happens or what we can do proactively and why we might be attracting these types of clients. Because there's nothing worse than signing up a client, getting totally excited because you made a sale and you're like, I get to change their life. This is so rad. And then they're not actually having any life changing because they're not going out and specifically doing the work. And if you've not yet experienced this person inside your business, then you may, or it may be because you're actually doing some of the things that I'm going to share today, and you're tending to not attract this type of person for a reason. And um, this person is even somebody maybe in a group program that doesn't submit their check-ins on a weekly basis as expected, or they're just like, I'm not motivated, and they might even on a call say, this isn't working, I'm not making progress. And inevitably, this is part of the coaching, right? It's belief shifting, reframing that. And we might also see that this appears to be a pattern. And I actually did have this pattern happen in my business. And I began to figure out why it was happening. So I'm going to share some really honestly transparent experiences that have shifted, the way I have done business. And so I think there's a little bit of an overlooked reason that this first happens. And first, I'm going to talk about why this could be happening and what we could do about it. And one of the main reasons I think that this actually happens, especially in the beginning stages of business growth, is that we spoon feed and we treat the client like they're our baby. We do everything for them from the beginning. It's kind of like your kiddo. If you're doing everything and they're 13 years old, you're making their lunches, you're setting out their clothes, you're making sure they do their homework, blah blah blah, all that. You're never giving them the autonomy to actually fail and figure it out themselves and learn how to problem solve and thrive in an environment that's requiring them to create success, right? I want my kid to be a thriving citizen. And if I do the work for them, they hit adulthood and they're going to go like, oh, shoot, mom, what? I don't know how to do these things. And they're probably going to get overwhelmed and frustrated when they try and they just shut down rather. And so I believe this actually could be happening starting with the sales process. I went through a phase in my business in the beginning where I really felt like the more I did in the beginning, it equaled customer service. So I'm like, I want to be totally hands on. I want to make sure they feel loved on, nurtured on. And so I would be like, here's this. Oh, you didn't get this? I'll send it again. Oh, you didn't need this? Okay, let me get this. And so even on the sales call, if they didn't show up, I would tend to chase them and pursue them basically like you're sprinting after them. And I've experienced this wave really two times in my business, once at the beginning and then once after kind of feeling a lull and a dip in sales. I started to take away some of the things that I'm going to tell you about that helped rectify this situation, because I fell into this, like I would call it like desperate energy of like my revenue was so high and I started to hit this lull and I was like, well, it must be because I'm not nurturing. I'm making it too hard to coach with me. And it honestly had nothing to do with that. I later figured out. But I was a chaser in those environments. So I was doing the pursuing and I was very attached to the yes on a sales call, especially because when we don't have a lot of clients, we just get so excited about the opportunity to work with someone. And we're going to like bend over backwards. We're like, okay, I've been on the call so many times, like, oh, you can't afford this. And then in the back of my brain, I'm like, should I give them a discount right now? Like, what should I do? Should I mold the offer and bend over backwards to get them to say yes? And I did that so many times. And what I started to notice, the people I was bending over backwards for, that I made it easy for them and easier because I desperately wanted the yes, were the ones that actually did not do the work and did not get the results. And I didn't realize this at first. I just thought like, oh, it's just them, right? And then I started like looking at the patterns. And I started, with hindsight, of course, looking back, like Monday morning quarterback. Oh, the red flag is I actually became a chaser. I had desperate energy. I maybe let go of the values or the things that were important to me because I desperately wanted the sale. And so with that, what that conveys to the client is that I will do anything for you to make this work. And so it perpetuates that pattern. So they're not taking action and they're like, okay, but it's your responsibility. They may not even consciously do this, but unconsciously, we've told them this. It's kind of like my kids. If I don't make them put their dishes in the dishwasher, then they literally just would set them on the counter. And if I never say, hey, you need to come back and do this, it's your responsibility, and I just keep picking up the dishes for them and putting in the dishwasher, then they unconsciously just know they don't have to be accountable for that particular action in their life. Our clients are doing the same thing, whether they realize it or maybe even whether you realize it. Another thing that I want to share with you, which was a massive learning experience, is at what point in my former group program, I even decided, you know what, I'm going to offer like a scholarship. I'm going to offer this opportunity. And so I created an application and I had like 15 people apply for this scholarship. I sent out one email and just basically said, I find that, the main objection is, and this was COVID times, like kind of coming out of COVID times. It was kind of on my heart. I'm going to give scholarships. And I was like, we'll see, who applies, what their circumstances are. I had a flood of applicants. I did not take them all. And I think I ended up allowing 6 or 8 into the cohort. And what's interesting about that is some of those people, never showed up to a call. They didn't do the work. Some that did show up would be, I would say, in the energy of effect, complaining, a lack of ownership. And it actually, I think, hindered the integrity of the community a little bit. And it was a really, really great learning experience for me because what I'd learned, by the way, is I became a chaser. And while offering a scholarship doesn't sound like chasing, it's that I compromised what what I normally would allow. And because of that, the energy of the I handheld, I made it, the barrier easier for entry. And it did not serve anybody that was inside the community, including them. And I think this is really driven often by just the desire to make profit, and secondary is the desire to serve. And I do think it's often in that order. I think sometimes we're like, oh, I could bring in a couple $1,000s right now. It'll be okay. We can like ignore the red flags. If you're like me, I'm like, oh, well, I want to save them. Like, I want to be the one time that they have, success. I believe so deeply in my gifts that I'm going to be the one that changes it for them, and it brings in that desperate energy that actually doesn't serve them at all. And so here's some tips that I would offer to help shift and really think about how that energy is showing up for you and how to attract clients that are doing the work. The first is really thinking about your offer and your coaching in a different way. I used to think like, because I had this goal of growth, that my offer was open to everyone. And the more I made it available, then the more potential I had to serve. And I've had to reframe that a little bit. And now what I am working to train myself into really believing deeply about my offer is it's sacred. My offer is a sacred place that only the right people with the right problems, with the right, let's say, the word I'm looking for is like the right descriptors, the right traits, it's only for that person. And I am not willing to make exceptions, because ultimately, if I make those exceptions, then the offer I have for them doesn't get them the results that they actually came to me for. And what it does is waters down the testimonials and the outcome. If I let the wrong person into my offer, then they don't actually leave the offer telling everybody how rad it was. Right. And so I think this is where we can do some shifting, is your offer is sacred. Only the right people get to access it. And the more you believe that, then the more you can put in place to protect that offer to keep it sacred. And so here's some tips I have around that. The first thing is you must qualify the lead. It's great if you have thousands of leads, but that doesn't mean that you actually have engaged leads or high quality leads. High quality leads are people that actually want to go deeper into the coaching journey with you in some capacity. Could be a low ticket offer, moderate, high, whatever the case is. But what we're trying to do is create an enrollment process that requires them to take some sort of action. And this could be group or one-to-one work. It really doesn't matter. And it also depends on who you are and what you desire out of your community. And so what this does when we qualify them is it's attracting the people that really want to work with you, right? Because now they've got to take this next step. And if they're willing to take this next step, then that's a pretty good indicator that you've said something and built rapport and trust. You've shown evidence that you are a person that they believe so far can solve their problems. If they're not willing to make and jump on a sales call, there's been so many people that have reached out with interest over the years, and I've said, hey, yeah, here's a link to my calendar, schedule some time to chat and we'll talk about next steps. If they don't sign that calendar, you guys, or jump on that calendar, then that is a great indication that they're not serious about their own results. And it's a great red flag for me to know that I'm not going to go chase them, because if I do, then I'm pushing them into something that they may not be willing to commit. And I see this all the time. And so to qualify them, I like I mentioned, one easy step, especially in the beginning, is to bring people into sales calls. So invite them into discussion, right? And this is something we constantly are talking about inside the BDC, is how to have these conversations in a very integrous way that feels aligned for you, but also calls out the opportunity that you have to coach them. And we have, by the way, scripts to support you. And we have monthly live sales calls specifically, where any struggle you're having on a sales conversation, you bring that and we coach through it, we role play, etc. And so that's a great way to qualify leads. Another great way, which is the way I lean on for one-to-one, is to have an application process. And so they don't even really get access to a sales call until they've completed the application. If the application looks really fantastic and I'm like, oh, this first person feels very aligned, then my team reaches out and says, Amanda would love to chat with you. And we'd love to set up a call. When I did not have a team in place, I had a form on my website, which we still do, by the way, and they completed that. And when I saw those forms come through, I would get a notification and I would just reach out to them myself and say, hey, I loved your application. Let's set up a call. I actually found that at the times in my business where I was using those applications, my conversion rates on calls went up. However, I was taking less calls, but the quality of the applicant was supreme and high. And so I knew if they filled out the application, they're already a great fit for me to move on to coaching with. And that's a win for all of us. And then the other piece that I would encourage is some of the more simple, just mindset, shifts through understanding why we sometimes are attracting the wrong people, is that we want to stay safe. We don't want to say things that ruffle feathers. We don't want to really speak our deep truths or our deep passions on our content or in our newsletters. But you guys, the right people that hold your offer sacred are the ones that want to read those newsletters every week. The people that are unsubscribing are not for you, and that's going to be constant cycle, right? Those are the people that crave your content and want your content because you're showing up fully yourself, not out of desperate energy, but of service energy, of knowing your offer is so sacred for the right person. You only want to allow that right person to come in. And so if you find that your clients inside, once they get inside to your coaching container, aren't necessarily always doing the work, two things, as I mentioned at the start, and I want to circle back. one, this could be a coaching question, right? And there are ways that we can coach through this to bring them back in. Maybe you broke rapport, maybe they're unclear, maybe there's so many things here. And the second learning piece is, how do we increase the qualification process so that we're not chasing them, we're not feeling desperate or behaving in a desperate way? Because when we do that and we are willing to sacrifice the things that are important for us, then it often does show up inside the coaching. If you have any questions, you guys, on today's topic too, I love to talk more with you. Of course, I'll be talking about this on social media all week. Tag me if you're listening to this episode. I'd love for you to share it in your screenshots, on your stories, and whatever platform. And also, if you have somebody in your world that you think would benefit from this conversation, you belong to a community or you're surrounded by fellow coaches, I would be so grateful if you just copy and pasted the link to listen to this episode and just send it to them in a text message like, hey, if you haven't listened to Amanda's podcast, she's a rock star, and this episode really spoke to me. I would be so, so grateful. So until next time, keep coaching them up, and I'll see you same time, same place next week.